You are not crazy. Reading literature is as simple as creating your perfect burger, be it veggie burger, turkey burger, buffalo burger or beef burger. In fact, there are a few essential elements to know and understand about literature, and you will be reading it like a literature major. As we all know, a hamburger has 3 essential ingredients: the bun, the meat or meat substitute, and the condiments or toppings of your choice. I like mine with pepper cheese and jalapenos, or with Swiss cheese and Thousand Island dressing, and a bit of sauerkraut. The toppings are as unique as you are. Reading literature is similar. It has 3 main parts. 1. The bun, which is the story or plot line that wraps up the whole story. 2. The theme, or the meat of the story, which leads us to a deeper meaning to what it is to be human. And 3. A variety of literary elements that give the work its unique flavor. These include things like symbols, historical context, conflict, word choice, diction, tone, etc. Don't worry, we'll get into these later. When you read, you bring in your own interpretations, life experiences, and ideas to each piece of literature. In other words, even though each reader will find the same plot and theme, we have different interpretations of the perfect story. And what is even more wonderful is that no matter the interpretation, it is not wrong if you can provide evidence from the story to back up your interpretation. For example, most of us have seen the movie Shrek. Guess what? It is a classic plot that we find in epic poetry, plays like Romeo and Juliet, and the like. Boy meets a girl, goes on an adventure or journey with a sidekick, and falls in love with the girl, loses the girl, but rescues her to live happily ever after. And there are several themes we can find in the movie. Good always triumphs over evil, and it doesn't matter what we look like on the outside, it's who we are on the inside that matters. For example, as for the ingredients, we have symbols like the color green, the concept of the journey, and allusions to famous fairy tales like Three Blind Mice, The Gingerbread Man, Pinocchio. And we even have adult humor in there with innuendos and the like. We have to realize that there is nothing original in literature. It's all been written before and changed hundreds of times. Many stories may be taken from the Bible or religious documents like the story of Cain and Abel or the prodigal son, Shakespeare in the previous mentioned Romeo and Juliet, fairy tales like Cinderella and the movie Pretty Woman, and all kinds of mythology like Homer's Iliad, for example. We have family fights as in Hamlet or Cain and Abel, or epic battles between good and evil, Star Wars, Beowulf, Harry Potter, Paradise Lost. Then there are the stories where the prince rescues the lovely maiden as in Shrek or Snow White or King Arthur. Literature generally falls under one or more of 4 major topics, and of course, there are multiple subtopics under each. Sex or love, death, religion, or politics and social conventions. That's it. If you can find one of these topics, then the theme is developed from that topic. More on theme later. The literary elements found in any story or poem depend a great deal on your interpretation, but the more you know and have read the classics in literature or within a culture, or the more you know about the author of the work, or the more you know about cultural symbols and other literature that could be referred to, the easier it is to find these connections. Reading literature then is a bit like creating your palate. You can taste things differently when you think about what you are tasting. The same is said of literature. You can understand more when you start thinking about what you are reading and making those connections. Again, there are no right or wrong interpretations if you as the reader can provide your unique interpretation with specific examples from the story. In other words, I can say that Pretty Woman is like Cinderella because you have a poor girl who falls in love with a rich man. Other factors to consider when we read literature is the concept of needs. If you have had a psychology class, you need that as each need level is met, then we can move to the next level of need. The same if true of characters within a piece of literature. If the character has his or her physiological and safety needs met, then he/she can fall in love easier. Once we have been loved or in love, we develop self-esteem, etc. To find the needs in literature, look for something that may be lacking in a character that at the climax, or even the end of the story, this need is met. Look for what motivates a character to a particular action in the plot. Look for what the character has learned or wisdom gained from the experience. These will always happen as a result of some type of conflict and a change the character makes in his or her life, or choices, or who she is. Let's move on to the theme. A theme is the message, the moral to the story. Sometimes students of literature confuse themes with a topic. A topic is generally one or two words, love or death. But a theme is a complete sentence. It is better to give than to receive. Or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you notice, a theme is a value or a moral in which we are encouraged to live our lives. As mentioned before, a theme will deal with the four components of human existence. There are often allusions to past literary works as well in most literature. The themes in literature denote a change in the character, seeing things clearly for the first time, changing a belief about another person or an event, changing actions and coming to a greater understanding, acting to help society, understanding what it means to be human or even a higher spirit. For example, look at the changes in Luke in the Star Wars movies. Or the fiend Darth Vader. Even though he goes from good Jedi to bad boy, in the end, he sees the errors of his ways and returns to the Force in good graces. Other changes in characters from the start of the literary piece to the end is the character will learn how to act or when not to act. Most characters will be able to see a potential problem and avoid it through previous experiences that were learned. Or the character changes enough to handle whatever may come in life with peace of mind. So as you are beginning to see, literature actually mimics what it is to be human. We can gain from a character's experiences just by reading the story. And literature takes us to places we may never see or imagine, but connects us because we are human. Another aspect in literature is the use of symbols. Symbolism is when an object can stand for itself and a greater idea. The object is always going to be a noun, like a rose that stands for an emotion, that of love. So think of something that has a literal image and a figurative meaning. And many symbols can have multiple meanings. We have to train ourselves to look and find symbols in literature. Look for a repetition of an object or even extreme detail in describing the object. Sometimes authors will use a symbol in multiple works. For example, Poe's use of midnight as the witching hour in so many stories and poems. Authors will plant symbols to alert readers to its importance. Symbols will always give us clues to the theme of the literary work as well. But you have to train yourself to look for symbols in literature. They don't jump up and scream, "Hey reader, I'm a symbol." Can give reader clues as to the theme of the literary work. There are a lot of common symbols in American and English literature because we share a similar culture. Symbols may have different meanings in different cultures. Usually a trip in a story or poem is going to be a journey to self-knowledge. Look back at Shrek again and how all three characters, the princess, the donkey and Shrek all gain self-knowledge of who they were after their journey. This is the symbolic reason for a trip. Other common symbols include eating, flight, and water, which can have multiple symbolic meanings depending on how it is used in a story. Of course, what would a symbol be without sexual connotations? We are talking more about the parts, but the act of sex as well. Bowls, cups, vessels that are round represent the female sexual organs. Why do you think the Holy Grail in Indiana Jones and the Da Vinci Code were cups? Guns, swords, obelisk-shaped objects are the male sexual organ. We can also show the two together as in a lock and key, and mortar and pedestal, both of which signify the act of sex itself. Of course, there are other aspects in sexual symbols: original sin, love of a parent or child, fear, power, domination, sacrifice, among others. There are also Christ figures that can be found in many pieces of literature. One of my personal favorites is Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, because the main character's name is Lieutenant Jimmy Cross, J.C. He embodied self-sacrifice to protect his men in the jungles of Vietnam, went through agony in the decision-making process, spent time alone in the wild. Other Christ symbolic meaning would be wounds in the hands and feet, miracles, being a carpenter, groups of 12 and often the number 3, for Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Other common symbols include seasons and time that portray the circle of life. The names of characters that could allude to other pieces of literature, for example Homer Simpson, and Homer in the Odyssey. A woman named Faith or a child named Hope would also be an allusion. Look for things like scars or deformities or physical imperfections that show a character's shortcomings. Even body parts are symbols, eyes that speak, a broken heart, etc. Animals also indicate a symbol as shown in this slide. Plants, too, can be symbolic as well. In fact, we are surrounded by symbols in our daily lives and don't realize it. Finally, most of us recognize the symbolic meaning of color: black, blue, green, white, pink, etc. Authors deliberately plant these symbols for the astute readers to catch. It doesn't affect your understanding of the story, but enhances it, much like developing a palate for fine wine will do. It takes a bit of time and practice, but you will soon start to see symbols even in television shows and movies. They are there, we just haven't looked for them in the past. Historical context of when the story or poem is set is also important in leading to a deeper understanding of a piece of literature. Places like Jerusalem or Salem, which is a version of Jerusalem. Greece, the home of modern Western civilization, the Holocaust, deserts, mountains, oceans will all have meaning in a piece of literature as well as what specific event happened in that time and place. The other big picture item to pay attention to in literature is conflict. Conflict is the struggles between the protagonist or good guy in the story and the antagonist or bad guy, or even an evil or opposing force. There are several types of conflict listed here, and remember, a story or poem can have more than one type of conflict. Looking back at Shrek, each of the three main characters had a type of conflict. Now you know the basics of reading a literary work. Literature and what we read is under control of the author, who creates worlds and characters that can say, do and mean something. When we read, we need to find the meaning in the story. It's always there. But your job as a reader and student of literature is to look for these hidden meanings and context and interpret them using your own experiences and education. But here is the hard part. You need to not just tell me as your instructor what the meaning was that you found, but show me where you found this and got this idea from the literature. Without both, telling and showing, you are not interpreting literature correctly. When we interpret literature, we never repeat the plot or storyline. This will get you a C grade if you are lucky. There is not thought in telling me what happened. I already know this. I want to know what you have found in the symbols, the conflict, the figurative meanings. You need to take responsibility for your own understanding of the literary piece and show me your understanding. That's it. You are now well on the way to understanding the literary works we'll be covering in the next few weeks. Just remember the parts, the 4 topics, and you can start building your own literary hamburger. Time to get cooking.